I mix what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball. Very happy to be your host. Got my main man, Geechee Y'all. What's up, sir? Good morning to you. Greetings to all the remixers out there as well. How you feeling today?
Doing well, man. How you? Peace, good morning, remixers. How y'all?
I'm as good as could be expected. Looking forward to our conversation with Two Black. I was saying, as I said on Twitter again, I always look forward to my these editions of well, you're here, so it changes it a little bit. But when it's just me and Two Black, I like the whole, Two Black and Not Black Enough special edition of I Mixed What I
All I know is I Two Black snapped on that article. I sent it to a couple people, and their mind was blown. So that was a powerful album. I'm looking forward to it. Awesome.
Yeah. So I see Two Black is in the background. I don't know if he's intending to stay audio only, but Two Black, when you put your camera on, we'll bring you up. And then I don't know. Do we get Diallo this week or what? What's happening?
I think he was over there at the Queen's funeral, so I'm not sure.
Oh, right. He was mourning. He was deeply saddened, and I know this is a stressful time for him. So
he's supposed to be speaking at the repast. I think at the Queen's repast. So, I know he's gonna be busy. So.
Well, right on. So we want to wish him a happy trip and make sure he stays safe. And maybe he'll pop on from merry old England, and give us an update. You know what I'm saying? There are a couple of things that it looks like he's ready. Two Black, what's up, sir? Two Black Miss Podcast, columnist with Black Agenda Report, all kinds of stuff. Activist, poet. What's up, sir? Good morning to you.
What's good? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I'm not at my crib, so I'm just making sure everything is cool.
Okay. No, right on. Appreciate you joining us this morning. Definitely appreciate the work. Before we get to that, though, and before I forget, there are a couple things, and I'm glad you all are here, if you don't mind. Two Black, are you good on time? Do we need to?
Yeah, I got time.
Okay. So if we can, there are a couple things I just want to get to before we move on to your very strong article about Laundering Black Rage. One big shout out to our brother Netfa Freeman and the good people in Pan-African Community Action and Black Alliance for Peace, who are putting together this International Month of Action Against AFRICOM, Colonialism, Compradors, and the Militarized Capitalist Class. Saturday, October 1st, 10 a.m. in California, 1 p.m. in New York, 6 p.m. in West Africa. You see the relevant details there. Stay in touch with Black Alliance for Peace for more, blackallianceforpeace.com, and jump in. This is perfect because I always like to remind folks that the first head of AFRICOM was General Kip Ward of Morgan State University graduate fame. And we were just talking about AFRICOM in my classes this week. So it's always good. And I don't know if she's here yet, but shout out to Ricky and Black Alliance for Peace. Anytime. Yep. Anytime you all want to come back and present at Morgan State, or at least in my classes, holla at your boy. But yeah. So let's definitely support this. And now, right on, Netfa. Absolutely. Thank you for doing the work. So anyway, either of you got any quick thoughts on AFRICOM? Anything you want to add to this? Anything I'm missing? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty, but you know what I'm saying.
No, we also have our, speaking of BAP, we also have our first in-meeting conference that I'll be attending at all.
Word up.
So just putting that out there. That's on like I think the 22nd. Or it's
okay, right now.
Erica got those dates on top of my head. I know it's like the 20th through 22nd or something like
that. And speaking of Morgan State, so as I keep teasing, I have this big announcement that I can't wait to share. A very humbling, very honored, very excited announcement that I'm gonna make in December, right? When I get clearance. But associated with that, I just made a pitch to my chain of command at Morgan in association with that special announcement to see if I can get them to what's the way to put this, to step up and make that announcement that much even bigger. So we'll see. This could be like we never know. This might be 2022 in some small way over here, might end with some big stuff happening that will reverberate. So anyway, stay tuned. Shout out to Morgan State. Shout out to all the contradictions, et cetera, and so forth. Anyway, and definitely thanks to BAP for being a leading voice on this issue of AFRICOM and the militarization of the continent, and what that means, bringing it all the way back to my students at Morgan State and in Baltimore and at HBCUs more broadly speaking, and all of us here more broadly speaking. So that's what's up. Looking forward to that.
Forgive me if you already answered.
No,
this.
go ahead.
So I know how the book was moving in Baltimore, how people respond, but how was the university and students responding to the myth of Black Power, the first edition? Like, was it like received well?
How did who?
Like the students and just the university in itself, like staff or.
I mean, there was no response from the university. I got one colleague who works nowhere around anything doing with me and does not even come specifically directly off of that African branch of the human family. Read the book, contacted me, and actually had substantive thoughts and ideas about how to strengthen the argument on the data side. But that's the only real interaction I've had with anybody in the university that I can think of. Ray Winbush shouted it out. Shout out to him. And I'm about to mention him again in a second here. So those two, I think that's it. The students, when I did use it in my class last year, the students enjoyed it. We had a really good time. And I think, like I had, I got to see firsthand, what, especially when there's a 16-week study going along with it, I got to see a little bit about what could be the positive impact of the book beyond even what I had hoped for. So that was exciting. But that's been about it, really. This,
Yeah, people like that book doesn't exist. So.
Yeah, but I mean, it don't matter because Two Black put it in his article, and that's it. That's all that matters.
And it dragged down the quality of his argument, like it slowed down, like no, but but this is something. So Two Black. It's funny you said that. So I am, trying to write one of those what's new sections for the second edition, and one of the drafts I have floating around, it does kind of dive into to me speculating. It probably won't end up in the book, but to me speculating about in terms of the response. And I do try to walk. Anyway, I struggle with it because it's like, on the one hand, it's like there's that side that tends towards an absence of humility, where I'm like, everybody's heard of it by now, and if you're not speaking on it, you're willfully shutting it down. And then there's others that are like, not everybody might have gotten it. It's not, Anyway, so I don't know. It's the response has been interesting though. Anyway, I
mean, Black buying power is a religion for people, unfortunately. So you could come around and tell them that Jesus isn't real or not, following the analogy, and it's just not gonna go well. Yeah. So
I mean, plus you got to go up against Kathy Hughes and a couple of those figures.
So I mean, that's been
every day.
So that's the other part of it. So like, for me to really, and this is why particularly one of the versions of this draft will definitely not see the light of day, but it really would require me to speculate on some personal and political things about individuals. And I'm really not trying to do that. And then it comes off as petty. Like, even when I go back and read my own draft, I'm like, that just, even if they were to publish it, it's like, it just sounds even more petty than I joke about myself being. And it may be right. And in some way we have to find a way to have these conversations. So I don't know exactly how to do it, but because the flip side is, and this is the other part, and then we can move on. But the flip side is that when people play this kind of keep away, they use the struggle that I'm describing right here as a defense mechanism to protect themselves and allowing themselves to make whack arguments or to avoid the argument altogether. And that's what's kind of frustrating. Like there's a disingenuous keep away. So if I step out and try to, reclaim some space, that's when you start to, or I would start to look, it's like, that's not a good look. So I don't know. It's a hard, and this is the point, Mo, man. I saw Paul Coates and Ray Winbush, who have apparently seen the new movie WomanKing at a film festival. They're praising it.
Yeah, I was about to say that actually.
Winbush said A+++++++++++. I mean, he had, so, the Vernon philosophy might get challenged, but I don't know. We'll see.
Well, so far I have a sister, Artemisia. She actually written half of a review, but she's gonna write her full review, and I'm willing to put her against Ray. I don't know, what's going on with Ray lately, but Dr. Ray. So yeah.
Hey, look, and I will say this, Dr. Winbush and I do not agree on everything, and we're cool on that. But when it comes to the behavior of faculty and senior faculty at an institution, I have not experienced anyone behave better than him. So I admit a bias here. So even where we might end up disagreeing on this, I can't be mad. I probably could never get mad at Dr. Winbush at this point. The way he at least tried to look out, so, but that said, we might disagree on this. I don't know. I'm gonna see it. Obviously, I think it comes out. They said October 16th or something like that. I don't know. So
I couldn't.
So that was one of the points. Yeah. Okay.
Hell, I thought it was out already. My bad. I ain't know.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I thought they said October something, and that they had just seen it at a festival. So
I'll see it. I'll see it, even though
I'm definitely gonna see it.
But, yeah.
And then we'll see. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Look, I admit it. Look, I admit the Vernon philosophy got challenged when I just watched the movie Prey again, that Predator movie. I think that joint is off the chain. And but it's not dealing directly, of course, with this particular history. So we'll have to see. Anyway, also just quickly, and if it's not there already, I'll put the link for sure in the show description. Please continue to support our fall fundraiser. I get it. We ask a lot. But if you can drop a couple dollars in there, please do. Will help support this documentary. We're whatever producing. I think that's what we're with Dev and crew and many other projects. So I'm gonna drop the link again in the chat and make sure it's in the show description as well. And thank you for your continued support. Couple other things here. Please do continue to put guest suggestions in the Discord and contact our small crew here at imixwhatilike@gmail.com for guest suggestions. And thank you very much. And real quick, I know this is perfect. So this was what I was gonna say too, Black. Your whole article about Black Rage is now moot. And I don't know, the timing is unfortunate because all the issues are for real solved. They're on their way to really being solved. So for real. So really? You don't need to be we don't need any more Black Rage because Diddy is going to buy Disney. So and if you haven't seen it, he's going to do it for us too, Black. Okay. So Rage complete.
This is worse than this is worse than Cosby, man.
Yeah.
He better watch out. this is what they said was the downfall of Cosby, right? His attempt to buy NBC 40 years ago.
Don't he got a history of stealing his son's girlfriend as well?
Oh damn! Did he do that too?
Yeah, he did. I think he did do that.
Yeah.
I just want to say,
so he steal his artist royalties. his
Walt Disney is valued at $203 billion. So good luck with that. You know,
he could put a team together.
Nah, he don't even got
a team together.
Elon Musk couldn't buy Disney. So, you know,
he's about to drop $44 billion to get that Twitter though. Or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, I just so it's good. So now we could talk about this context of laundering black rage as past tense. Is really the point I'm getting at.
That resolved the issue.
We can look at this article you've written in past tense. One more quick point before we do, and then that's it. Is that please do go to freeMutuluShakur.com. Judge Haight. At least that's how I understand the pronunciation, which I think is perfect, had again denied him compassionate release due to the fact that the First Step Act that Shakur's lawyers were attempting to use is apparently not applicable, given that Shakur's crimes took place before the grandfathered whatever time. So Shakur doesn't, and also as Judge Haight said, that the officers of the slain Brinks officers, families, that is the families of the slain Brinks officers, have spoken out against the release. So, you know, he had to again deny MutuluShakur compassionate release, as they call it, so. Anyway, please continue to support Prison Radio, Freedom Archives, Jericho Movement, freeMutuluShakur.com, and whoever else is working with those trying to free political prisoners, because, you know, I mean, I don't even know what to say. So that's that. But like I said, this is all past tense because Diddy is buying Disney and he's doing it for us. So this issue of Black Rage that 2Black has written so eloquently about is no longer relevant, but we'll talk about it anyway because we like talk about history here at Black Power Media.
This is nostalgia.
So, this is nostalgia for all of us. Identity, what do they call us? Black identity extremists and snowflake SJWs. Anyway. So seriously, blackagendareport.com, Laundering Black Rage, 2Black in the latest edition. Very well written piece here. Let me just give you a chance to lay out what you think, you know, what it is you're attempting to say here. And then I definitely have a few questions and points I'd like to highlight and praise you for. But anyway, so what is Laundering Black Rage?
Yeah, so the way I've been trying to think about it as far as how to explain it, we can take Laundering Black Rage. We can put laundering on one side and Black Rage on the other side, and we'll bring them together. So first, just to give people an understanding of what laundering actually is. Well, not actually. The way laundering is understood in the dominant culture versus what I'm trying to say. Laundering is when you take so-called illegal money and you try to inject it into the quote-unquote legitimate economy by legitimizing it through a series of transactions. So there's like 3 stages to laundering. There's placement, there's layering, and there's integration. Placement is when you take, let's say we're all drug dealers for the sake of this conversation. So we go out, we sell drugs, coke, heroin, it don't really matter. And then we need to find a way to legitimize that money to quote unquote clean it, right? So the placement is when we figure out a way where to insert it at. So normally you start a front or you have something that has a quote unquote legitimate cash flow that you put that money into. And then when you put it into there, you layer it with the quote unquote legitimate money. So let's say we go buy a strip club or a restaurant or something, and we take the money that people spend in there and we blend it with the money that we made on the street, and then we take that money and we disperse it to various other investments. When that money comes back, that money is all integrated into the system, right? And now that money has been cleaned. That's laundering, like in a gist. I'm sure many people watch TV shows which actually usually get this part right to understand laundering, but that's like a short explanation of it. So there's a few flaws with this, as I lay out in the essay. There's major flaws with this definition because it assumes there's a side of legitimacy and cleanliness and good, and then there's a side of bad and illegitimacy, right? But when you look at the United States, the West, and as I lay out essentially the state, the capitalist state, how did they earn their money, right? What makes that money legit? What makes it a legitimate financial system? So if you go out and you steal, kill, you enslave people, you steal resources, and then you set up a country, a colony, a state, and you come up with all these institutions, whether it be banking, whether it be government, whether it be schools, whether it be media, religion, etc., and you put the money that you stole through conquest and you legitimize it through the state that you set up, and then now it's the United States of America. Now it's a colony. Now it's a colonial company. Now it's all these quote unquote legitimate enterprises that came from the very things that these people themselves define as crime, right? Whether it be slavery, whether it be theft, etc. So it's to say that money laundering in and of itself can't be understood as something that happens outside of the system. The white capitals actually legitimize their actions. They go out, they plunder the world, and then they legitimize it by setting up a state. So the state just becomes a front for white capital. And then anything that's built underneath that is just its own front as well, because the capitalist system is set where the money always was going to the top. So Black Rage is just a logical outcome of conquest, right? It's really that simple. So if you go out and you steal, you enslave people, you lock them up, and then you say that this is now my country and it's not yours anymore, then obviously somebody's going to be mad. It's really not that deep. Like, it's not that hard to understand. So Black Rage is the process in response to conquest. But since the state is set up as a laundering institution, then you figure out a way to launder Black Rage as well. But my argument is that Black Rage isn't simply like this emotion that it's often taught as, but it's actually a form of labor. Because when you actually show up with your rage, you don't just sit on it. You eventually go out and do things. Whether that's violent or non-violent, you go out and protest, you burn shit down, you rebel, you revolt. Sometimes it gets all the way to revolution. All those things become a form of labor that then creates a social pressure, or as I say, a social capital that the state then uses to launder through the same apparatus that are already set up through conquest. So that's like a short breakdown so we can understand a variety of things with that. I go through a litany of things in history. So one of the ways of doing it is splitting up the interests of Black Rage, where the Black Rage comes with its own contradictions. It's not inherently revolutionary, or it doesn't have one direction. So you have like more bourgeois rage that just wants to be integrated and is angry that's not integrated into the fronts. It's angry that it's not receiving positions within the fronts. And then you have the rage that has the potential to just destroy all the fronts and build its own thing. But that rage gets layered, and it's assumed that the elite rage, or as I use bell hooks, the narcissistic rage, is seen as the same thing as the militant rage. And once you layer that together, you end up with us thinking that somebody getting a corporate board seat, somebody getting hired somewhere, Diddy trying to buy Disney is the same, it fits in the same interest as the masses. So when those things happen, we don't see that these things don't actually work on our interests, or we simply just don't have the power to do anything about it because our rage has already been put down. Again, rage is actual labor.
I just want to take a quick second to say Too Black made the reference to bell hooks and can argue the point as well as anyone would like. I don't want to hear from a whole bunch of people keep contacting me about why we talk about bell hooks and she hates black men and black nationalism and all this other stuff. I don't want to hear it. I get so many comments about that. I didn't even say anything. Okay. All right, so I'm not afraid to criticize bell hooks, but that's not anyway. So I heard you mention it, and I got triggered by that. I'm like, I'm about to get a whole deluge of emails. Too Black said her name. Okay. Anyway, my bad.
Yeah, me either. I feel like one, Dr. Ball, especially if you're gonna write on a topic, you have to reference somebody that wrote on the actual thing that you're writing about. Otherwise, you're not being a legitimate scholar. So she has an entire breakdown of Black Rage. So for me to ignore it is just not fair. And I've referenced all the people that we look up to in the essay, so I'm not really worried about that. But I almost put something in the notes about this, and I was like, I'm not addressing this. Somebody wants to say something, then they can do it, because George Jackson and Jonathan Jackson are referenced in there, and I know about that conflict. I know what she said, but that for me didn't negate what the purpose of the point about militant rage and narcissistic rage, even if you think she's actually criticizing herself in that passage. So
that's interesting. Right on. Anyway, so thank you for that. Geechee, were you trying to say something? Because I don't want to get equally accused of shutting down your mic again.
Nah, so I have a couple things, but the first thing, when I thought about like Black Rage and I guess the commodification of it, like would you tie in? So a lot of these artists today, especially like maybe the singing, rapping artists, some of the comments you hear is like, oh, you see the pain in their voice. You hear the pain in their voice. You see the pain in their face. And I think there's just like one song I was looking up. I don't remember the name of it. Youngie Ace Pain or whatever. It's like almost 60 million views, and people keep talking about like he lost his brother, he been shot, he wearing bullet wounds all over him. Like, do you see that as also a commodification of this pain or rage? And like, I guess, how do you tie the selling of that type of music in?
Yeah, I think there's some stuff I could just quote that I said, so I don't even have to try to say it worse than I wrote it. But I think I said ergo, what first appears to be inspired by Black Rage is reduced to simulacra. The self-determination of Black power is pigeonholed to front Black capitalism. The anger and suffering, this is to your point, the anger and suffering of the Black poor is liquidated to front Black rich entertainers' ambitions. The courage of Black militancy is strangulated to front state repression, and on the laundering goes. At the helm of nearly each sheep-herding front squats the Black elite, feeding off the breadcrumbs bribed to them by white capital. So anything we think about probably fits in here. It's just a matter of understanding maybe where it fits. So it's not, I'm not even arguing that this is like a grand conspiracy, that this is something that's even always purposefully thought through by the state or capital. I just think it's a consequence of just owning the means of production, and things are just, and just like finance, just like money goes to the top, everything else becomes a commodity and the benefits of it goes to the top. So if you're making a song about Black pain or whatever, logically you're going to have to go through a record label, you're going to have to put it on Spotify or YouTube. It's going to have to be marketed by the same people who have oppressed you in the first place, and they are always going to get a cut from that just based on the setup of what it is. That's the thing. The Black Rage doesn't happen outside of the state. It happens within it, and therefore it has to fight with the actual entanglements that it's involved in. And if you cannot wrestle away an actual form of control over those means of production, then automatically they're going to get a cut off of anything you experience. It's just a consequence of owning, and it's just a consequence of conquest. Like, you own all this shit. So if I'm a Black man like that, whoever made a song in 2020 about I can't breathe, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's going to have to go through their apparatus. right? Like that's just the natural way it has gonna have to go. It doesn't mean you shouldn't make that song or you shouldn't say what you got to say, but we often say things get co-opted, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. But I think co-optation is just the nature of capitalism. It's just the nature of being under conquest. Like, you don't own it. So, I guess, as I say in the essay, you also don't own your rage. The moment you express it as labor, it will get transformed into a commodity. And I have like 3 stages I laid out of how that happens. We can get to that later. But I think that that's more so how we have to think about it than, oh, it was this revolutionary thing and then it got co-opted. Well, depending on the direction that went, that was almost an inevitable outcome, like, because that's the way it's already set up. And I think sometimes we're dealing with a lot of stuff in the present, but like I say in the essay, Black Rage ultimately is a response to conquest. Laundering throws it off the scent, and it makes it about, discrimination or, lack of opportunity or poverty or whatever. But those things are consequences. Those things are symptoms of being conquered. Like, you don't have self-determination, so automatically you're gonna struggle to overcome any of those things overall as a people. And then there are people who are bribed, not through anything special, just through the nature of how this works, to keep it going. And a lot of us work for bribes, and we just call them wages, we just call them wealth, we just call them whatever. But you have to work to take care of yourself, but the state is already conquered and set up the front. So everything that comes after that, unless you take control of that, I'm arguing is its own form of bribery or something of that nature, because you're not really getting your full value of your labor, right? We all know that. So what else is it? So everybody becomes launderers of what it was already conquered, and they just keep it going.
I just, as you see, I highlighted here, I just like that you said the word ergo in the joint. I was just like, ergo. I was like, oh shit, check that out. I was like, wow, go ahead too, Black. Anyway, nah. And yeah, Mr. The Fall 3, as I think we were talking about in one of the recent Answering Critics episodes, someone put in the full quote for us from Ward Churchill that I always butcher, that it's not speaking truth to power, it's speaking truth to the powerless who are in the teeth of power. Something like that. That's what I think is of that we are collectively doing here, because the power just co-ops the message, or it is already corrupted, is I think Too Black is saying here, yeah, I think this is a powerful point made in the piece too, that we don't own our rage. And I'll have to check this out. Thank you, Ricky, for that heads up. So if I can, I mean, there's a number of, I mean, you've laid it out, but there's a number of things. There's one thing that I wanted to raise as a quote unquote criticism in air quotes when you get into the Breaking Bad Heisenberg joint. One, Better Call Saul is better than Breaking Bad. I just want to let everybody know that if they watch Breaking Bad, you have to watch, But the other thing was you make a point in here. I think this is really well done. And when you're talking about money laundering and using Breaking Bad as an example of how it gets done, and you said, what did I write here? Because you said, the part where he's talking about using the common phrase, I was doing all this crime for my family, was a refrain in Breaking Bad. And you were talking about right here we go. Each step is consummated. That is, each step of the money laundering process is consummated to distance the source away from its questionable origins. Famously, we see this process transpire in the critically acclaimed TV drama Breaking Bad, when the meth chef Walter White, aka Heisenberg, buys a literal car wash to conceal his empire business. We also see, oh God, I didn't even catch that. Right, literal car wash. He's washing. I didn't even catch that. Right. You said that first. Right. We also see Walter try to redeem the source of his empire with the now infamous excuse, everything I do for my family. This type of rationalization of harm is common, considering that money laundering is predicated upon an appearance of legitimacy. Yet again, the source cannot be redeemed. So what I wrote was, I said, so I was thinking, and I may be contradicting myself here, given my argument about, you know, propaganda and all this other stuff. But what I wrote here was that I felt like at this point in the United States, continuing with your analogy, that the flaw in the Heisenberg comparison is that it's the wrong stage. You're highlighting the wrong stage of Walter White. That at this point, those in power here no longer, if ever, were in the do it for my family stage. They are in the where Heisenberg or Walter White was at the end of the series, where he comes out and flatly tells his wife, I've always been wanting to do this, and it's always been about this being who I am. Remember that part at the end where he's like, the family stuff was some bullshit, and it's always been bullshit. This is who I am. It's who I've always wanted to be, and I'm finally living my true self. So that was only little. It's not really a critique, but it's just the one point I wanted to make. Like, outside now, I get like the use of image and side war and propaganda to mislead us. But I feel like at this point, the United States and its behavior is just so brazen that it's like, nah, this is who I am. I've been trying to be Heisenberg. You know,
right.
One, the science teacher joint has always been fake. But anyway, that was, again, it's not a real critique, because I think it's not like I'm saying you've said something, you know.
Yeah, I guess. But no, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I guess I was trying to track a certain historical process. So I'm not saying that laundering started yesterday, right? Or, you know, I think that show came out in 2008. I don't know if it's better than Better Call Saul, but I think I watch both religiously, so I don't know about that. We'll have to debate that on another day. But I just finished Breaking Bad again.
Okay.
But I think I don't know. I would argue they were a little more brazen at the beginning than they are today. I think the propaganda is actually advanced.
No, you're right. That's what I'm saying. I contradict myself. It's a silly criticism. That's what I'm saying. It's not really a criticism. It's just, it was just something that came up, you know.
But I appreciate you highlighting that, because it's like, we're going to have to keep reiterating it, because I think when I've explained this to people, they go back to the typical laundering definition. That the point of bringing that up was to show, like, in that show, we have this guy who, you know, is, as an individual, breaks bad and goes the quote unquote wrong way. And then he starts his own like criminal enterprise. And that's separate of the overall quote unquote legitimate financial system. But him selling meth and trying to legitimize that through a car wash is honestly much less of a problem than you enslaving people and colonizing them and trying to legitimize that as a country.
Right.
Or, you know, you see what I'm saying? Like, that's much worse. So all the definitions of laundering try to say that, you know, we're trying to, like in the UN, I emphasize in the essay, they're trying to catch terrorists. You know, they talk about the HSBC and how they help launder, the bank that helped launder like terrorist money. But even that is like, that's a quote unquote legitimate bank. There's even research I couldn't put in here because I didn't want this. I wasn't trying to write a book at this point about how in the 80s during the war on drugs, the UK, the United States actually had to modify their war on drug laws, because once they started having more stringent bank laws, people didn't want to put their money in the banks. And this is based on the Money Laundering Act, which most people don't know, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, the law that has the crack cocaine disparity. The same act, there was the same law, they passed a Money Laundering Act. That's the first time in 1986 that money laundering was actually outlawed. Like the whole time it was never outlawed. So it's like,
I remember. Go ahead. Yeah. No, go ahead.
I'm just saying they as in the white capital legitimizes their actions through the state. And I think it's important also just to highlight here for me, the definition of the state that I have here is not simply the government. I don't agree with that expression of it. I think we should think of the state as a bit more, as a bit larger than that. So I used Russell Mawad's definition, the configuration of power of government, corporate interests, classes of elites, upper levels of bureaucratic management class that implements the ruling class's goals and aims that sit atop accumulated economic base. This is consistent with like Gramsci's definition of the state, Antonio Gramsci's definition of the state, Stuart Hall and policing of the crisis. Like this is pretty consistent with understanding the state as an entire apparatus that has different arms that work for capital, not simply just the government. So I just want to make sure people are clear. When I say the state, I'm not saying just the government. I think the government is part of the state. I think it's one of the most important aspects of the state. But the government, when they say the government's supposed to work for the people, that's not how this has ever worked, because that's not how it was set up. So the government is just it's just part of the overall capitalist superstructure. It's not the entire sense of the state that I understand. And I'm open for disagreements on that, but I just want people to know what I'm saying when I say the state. So there's not, when I bring up examples of business and examples of other lanes, I'm not just talking about the government.
Right. No, I certainly think that's right on. I forgot what I was going to say a second ago, but I did want to come to this point that you raise later on about the case study, which I thought was
quick side note. This was the easiest part of the whole essay to write, by the way. But go ahead.
Like, you mean what? Just finding evidence or examples?
Yeah, that whole section was the easiest part to write. I think I wrote that in a day, and then I obviously had to edit it, but that was pretty, because it was just it was like too many examples. But go ahead, I can speak on that later.
Yeah. Just sitting here in early June 2020, as contagious Black Rage was charring U.S. cities in response to the enkindling police murder of George Floyd, a sea of capital flooded the streets to cool off the raging heat. On the government front, the Democratic Party broke their 1-month online fundraising record, raising $392 million just in the month of June alone via Act Blue, including a massive $115 million in the first 4 days of June, thereupon capitalizing on the rage from Floyd's murder, which occurred only a week prior on May 25th. Posing as the opposition to Black Rage and the hotbed for white rage, the Republican Party also saw a huge bump in the same month, raising a respectable $131 million. On the philanthropic front, racial equity funding nearly tripled from $5.7 billion in 2019 to $16 billion in 2020. On the corporate front, roughly $50 billion was suddenly pledged by America's 50 biggest public companies on their foundations to fight so-called racial inequality. So the money just started flowing, and it's amazing that, again, you know, as we started off with the news, that all of this that we're talking about is past tense history, nostalgia, and irrelevant since Diddy is buying Disney. We're also in the past tense moment because all of this money has flooded. It's gonna empower the Democratic Party. It's going to empower Black communities. It's even going to soften the Republicans on issues of race, and it's going to make things better, right? That's the theme, right? Okay. And when you said Act Blue, I was just like, that's my favorite one, because and I'm going to look at it again, but there's a lot of money coming not only from these places, but specifically into these spaces we're in right now, in podcasting, in media, in punditry, making, you know, again, trying to preempt and negate the work we're all collectively involved in. But anyway, please elaborate, or go ahead. Yeah, or Geechee, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
No, I was about to say if 45. I think you said 45 of the 50 billion was given in loans. So maybe Diddy.
Yeah, loans or investments.
Yeah.
Loans or investments.
Yeah. Into small businesses and financial literacy projects. It's gonna be dope. We're gonna be so smart.
Now you see why Killer Mike's is in Keisha Lance Bottom's back pocket, because they're getting the loans.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a lot of money, and you know, again, I mean, yeah, it's got to be difficult to see all those numbers behind your name. So, you know,
yeah, I think that whole section, I was trying to highlight three main like industries, and I did not cover ad nauseum everything. So, like you were saying, Dr. Ball, there's more money coming in different areas. I try to cite stuff in there to hint people towards stuff. Like I cited the Hood Communist piece on the HBCUs and the neo-colonial relationship there, but as I couldn't get everything in there, that was the only challenge of that section, was trying to figure out like where to cut it off, because I could have done that forever. But I wanted to give like a tight breakdown. So there was the foundation world, which there's an actual map that tracks racial equity funding. And you can see it jump in 2020. I wanted to cover the obviously just politics, because I just think these main three fronts, a lot of the money that comes through these three fronts goes elsewhere. So politics, and then obviously corporations.
That was one of the few bright spots that I saw in the last season, that I know the new one just dropped, or the started, of Atlanta, where they did the whole nonprofit parody.
Yes, I heard about that. Yeah.
And the dude, I forgot the exact line, but one of the dudes is literally he's literally saying, like, with, like all of these brothers getting shot, I've never had more good meals and more funding and more invitations to ballrooms and shit like that. I mean, it was like,
yeah,
it's one of those, it's like, let some more pathology pop off and we get to party some more. It's real crazy, man. Anyway, but
and it's, so I go through each three of those sections and show like how that played out. So like we talked about with corporations, 45 of that 50 billion that was promised, like 45 of that is automatically set up to profit from, no matter what happens. It's either an investment or a loan or venture capital or whatever. And only about 70 million went to fight so-called criminal justice reform. And even that was probably weak as hell, right? So that money didn't actually go to fit the issue. And this is where we get to like black buying power and the corporate and the racial equity, or corporate, it really all three of them, honestly. But like the corporate and racial equity front, like, that money went towards buying black, which I wrote out about this last year when I was writing about Black Wall Street, about how this just didn't make sense to me. This is really what inspired this kind of whole thing. So it goes to buying black, it goes to black banking. It doesn't actually address the material conditions even remotely of what went down. And this is not anything deep. Anyone can understand this, right? So they're like, we're going to build black wealth and all of this shit. And none of that, even if these things were successful, like even if these things actually worked, if we just accept their premise, they have nothing to do with someone stepping on a man's neck. Like it just don't have anything to do with it, right? So like even if they did make sense, and they don't, as I cited Dr. Ball in this piece, even if these things did work, they don't deal with the actual poverty on the streets, because most of the people that are going to get these homes, that are going to get this wealth, are already not in a neighborhood where they're being policed like that anyway. This is where the class issue is important. And this is why I say the Black Rage gets broken up in different classes, because it becomes a thing where what happens to one black person is automatically signed for the next person, and there's no class differences. But we know that some neighborhoods are more occupied by the police, and therefore we're more likely to get killed by the police. We know there's a certain population of people, when we look at the actual numbers, is poor young black men who get killed by the police. That's just the numbers. I didn't deal with the gender aspect of it. I'm not even trying to get into that. I'm just saying that's who actually gets killed by the police the most. So for other people to get money off of that is just odd to me. And on top of that, I think we often say, and I say this in the essay, that that it's people profiting off of black death. But like I say, most days black people get killed by the police or by anyone. Black people die, black people get killed. Nobody says anything. No donations come through. Nothing happens. It's only when we actually get mad that all of a sudden we see this money show up, right? Now, and 2020 is an interesting case study, because we see how the laundering has perfected itself. In 2014, for instance, when everything went down in Ferguson, the fronts weren't in place. They were more so built to deal with civil rights rage. They weren't in place to deal with like the kind of new millennial post-civil rights rage. So there was actually some shit that was able to get through. They hadn't bought everybody off. They didn't have all that stuff set up. By 2020, you actually get to see like, oh, they've got all these things in place now. So once it happens, it's like immediately there's all these statements, and like we see with the Democratic Party, all this money gets raised because now people think they can actually address these grievances through the Democratic Party. Like all of this is already set up. As in 2014, that wasn't the case. And I haven't done this yet, but I think you can actually watch Black Rage, not even just in America, because I try to track this internationally, but I think you can watch like cycles of it. You can watch where capital that has a certain like acquisition or conquest, eventually rage pops up. There's revolutions, there's revolts all over the place. Things get bought off. Some people might get free. Most of us don't. Things quiet down, and then it cycles up back again. I think you can see that here from 2014 and 2020. They're like literally different because like it strengthens itself. It learns, the state learns how to better adapt itself to the rage of the people that they're oppressing. It's just natural. That's the only way it can survive.
I left this point up here where you track some of the money in terms of BLM, but also this line I've highlighted here that Black Rage was the source indirectly financing the entire heist. I mean, that's
right.
It's a powerful line and concept that you're describing there, and it made me think of I remember or the way I'm remembering. And I just heard this fascinating discussion in the context of religious studies about the sociology of memory. And I gotta do it. There's so much I gotta read, man. But specifically the way societies construct collective memory, like like if you extrapolate our own individual false memories to a societal level, it's like kind of spooky. Like we really. We really don't know what the hell we could be operating on so many different mythologies. But anyway, but I'm thinking of this scene that I saw in Ferguson where Jesse, I think I seem to remember Jesse being there, or was it Al that was there? And the name,
it was Jesse.
The crowd was it? Yeah, but the crowd was rebuking them.
Yeah,
and there was this moment. There was this moment of, and I felt it. There was this moment of, oh, this is a sign of progress. Like the old civil rights leadership is coming. The youth are like, nah. We see what you're trying to do. You can't run that hustle again. But to your point, and I think our broader collective messaging here at BPM and beyond or whatever is that no. The empire, the colonial apparatus, the capital apparatus sort of just adjusted itself, caught up to the new moment and said, oh, right, okay, so they don't want Jesse and them. Okay, boop, 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 pull up the next Ben Crump, Patrice, whoever the hell people are calling it. It's like boop, 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 boop. It's like we gotta call up the next wave and start the funding process.
The bribes just shifted elsewhere. The bribes shifted elsewhere.
Yeah.
Another interesting point though, I think that doesn't get brought up. I'm gonna come back to what you're saying, but I just as a kind of an aside. There's for all the money that Black Lives Matter raised, the Urban League and the NAACP still got more money. No one ever really seems to point this out. Like basically the Black Lives Matter, this is in that Washington Post article, and even your favorite person, Roland Martin, notes this as well. I cited both of them, like because he
Roland
said
be on it. Roland knows where the money's going. So, like he knows. He's like, because I'm trying to get my.
But he actually in that interview he said come to me first. You come to me first.
I know. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Like, wait, stop! All this money flying by.
So like I think they got like 130 out of the when BLM got 90 mil, it was like 136 mil. If you look at the actual Washington Post article, they have a chart of where the money went, and like I don't even remember what some of these entities are called, like the Negro Defense Fund or whatever the shit is, the NAACP, the Urban League, and even venture capitalist funds got more money. Then after that is BLM. out of that 50 billion, after that $50 billion corporation. So after that is BLM. So it's like, as much as they're like the face of the embezzling right now, because they just don't have a certain level of competence to even like buy off any kind of piece. Like they just hoarded everything. They just don't know what they're doing. That's why it went bad for them. But all these other people got money too, right? So I just think it's important to always remind everybody that.
But remember, I forgot when, but so I'm saying remember and I forgot. But a few months ago, we did a whole a section on Larry Fink and BlackRock saying you gotta. They gave it a whole category of a score that you had to reach if on your sort of like equitable, your equality corporate score for if you're doing diversity and green this and vegan that. He's saying you have to raise your corporate score post George Floyd if you want my money. And of course you all do, because I'm financing pretty much everything. BlackRock owns pretty much everything. So he was even saying to them, like, all of you lesser funds, all of you people who want our money and who use our platform and trading platform and all this other stuff to do whatever to abuse the world every day, get your score up. We need and then you can get my money. So yeah, what you're saying makes perfect sense that they would end up with everybody gets more money except the black people in the communities who are still being whose rage is being created. Damn. So for the black rage to feed all of this machinery, the rage of course has to be created. So then the system has to abuse black people to create the rage to then create the next cycle of funding. Anyway, this is
you need a boogeyman, right? Like, and you always hear in the nonprofit world people say shit like we're trying to work ourselves out of a job, which is bullshit. But
that is bullshit.
If that were true, then the point would be like, we don't want people to have anything to be enraged about, or at least when they are, we want to be able to genuinely address those grievances. And they're not trying to do that because, again, it's just not. I mean, I quoted Ruth Wilson Gilmore. She talks about like foundation money is just twice stolen wealth anyway, right? You already ripped it off your workers. Now you don't want to pay taxes. Here's a little grievance money, but the money that comes in is already money from conquest. Like, that's what I'm saying. That's how broad this goes. It's already money from conquest. Now, I'm not even advocating that nobody takes money at any point because this is the situation that we're under. So I'm not saying don't take the money or take the money. That's a different argument, like, for people to have. I'm just saying at the end of the day, that's where it's coming from, and we should be very clear that that's the process, and it's been perfected over time, like we just noted from Ferguson to 2020. When we think about neo-colonialism in and of itself, because I didn't cite Robert Allen, or I didn't quote him, I cited it, but Robert Allen lays this out, in Black Awakening in Capitalist America. I think one of the understated points there is he talks about how when Black power arises, initially that comes from the masses. And he said, he's like, the activists were surprised to see that the Black bourgeoisie was angry too, and that they kind of like overthrew the prior petty bourgeoisie of that era, right? So like the preachers and some of like and the teachers, like they overthrew some of that, and they wanted to be more outwardly expressive and Black and all of that shit. And you see that today too. They haven't fully overthrown that group of people, but they want to be part of that class. And they'll use the rage of the masses to thrust themselves into the conversation. You see this in plenty of neo-colonial states in Africa, throughout the Caribbean, where Fanon talks about this with the pitfalls of national consciousness, where like they'll use the struggle of the masses to push themselves forward. And then when they get into power, they just work for capital, and they just become, I think Fanon says, brothels for Europe. Like that's how a lot of these foundations and everything work as well. So they just become fronts on fronts, sub fronts, whatever you want to call it. And that's just how it goes. And I just think it's just unfortunate that our rage is used in that way. And I think just to be honest about, that's the direction that it often gets pushed. And we need to be real, I guess, as to put a question, or just not to put a question back, but just to think about this. I'm interested in y'all thoughts. Like, Black Rage has its own contradictions, and this is what I in my phases: incubation, which we can get into, incubation, labor, and commodification. I talk about how Black Rage has its own contradictions. Like, someone once said to me about co-optation. Co-optation is a self-critique. Like, you can't solely look at it as they just did this to us. And when we have things in us, we have desires that have kind of been incubated or promoted or developed under colonialism, where we do want some of this representation. We are okay with just taking the bribe, and then sometimes it's not even a moral condemnation. It's, there's not a better way. So I will take this cut over here, right? I will work here. I will do this because I don't see a better way to fight the situation. So I have no choice but to take the bribe, because, again, if we think of Black Rage as actual labor, the only way to actually like feed it is to go get whatever crumbs you can get, right? Like, as opposed to just thinking of it as an emotion, there's nowhere else for me to go, right? So I have to go through the actual apparatus that oppress me. So it's built with all these contradictions, class contradictions, gender, etc., that can be exploited to funnel it somewhere else, right? Because it's not that it shows up with this perfect revolutionary proletarian consciousness, right, that is ready to just go this way. It doesn't work like that. Like, I know when labor is more on that line, like in Haiti, they tried to co-opt that shit, the whole revolution, and they was just like, nah. Ultimately, they were like, no, like, yeah, a bunch of shit happened afterward, but when it came to slavery, that question was resolved. We're not doing it. You know what I mean? So it's like, other times, though, we don't have that kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, like organized labor. Like, all these contradictions get played on, and we take the deal. We don't go on strike. We don't rise up after a certain point. We go back to work. So I'm just interested in y'all's thoughts on that, as far as some of these contradictions that we all have kind of been given. Right.
Yeah.
Geechee, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I mean, I think one of the things, like when you said that, it's not that easy to get, or it's not that deep, but when you have propaganda that teach us that the proletariat is a black capitalist who's buying black power or whatever, it's like, I mean, to get people to have a serious conversation is just hard. And then one point, when Jared was talking about like the violence that's integrated inside, I thought about one of the premises from Endgames that we read a couple months ago, when he says our way of living, industrial civilization, is based on required and would collapse very quickly without persistence and widespread violence. And so I thought about a quote that you had in your article, when you talked about crimes enacted on one population becomes seed capital for the next crime of capitalist production in another. And so I know you mentioned primitivism in a different kind of context, but I guess I want to know your thoughts about like this concept of civilization, how it's not sustainable versus modernity versus minimalism or primitivism. I guess I'm just curious what your thoughts are on it. I know, like, we have anarchist thoughts, and people are against the state, and I love the way you included all what I would say entities that use the state to oppress people. But if it's all the state, it's cool. But I wonder what you think about this concept of, like, primitivism, technology, modernity, like how people see like this is just the way things are now. Like, you have to catch up with the times, as if like capitalism and this exploitation create all the good things that we see in society is also. So I don't know if that's clear, but I just think of.
I mean, if I'm not speaking to it, just cut me off and to redirect me. I guess the primitive I was talking about was, Marx talks about primitive accumulation. So I'm speaking directly to just try not to get into a long history here, but Marx talks about like really kind of like two different versions of the primitive accumulation within the kind of English situation where they kick people off their land. They, as in the capitalists or the merchants at the time, start kicking people off their lands. This is the enclosure movements. So people had some like means of production because they lived on their small farms or they were peasantry, and they kicked them off their land and they sent them into the cities, which is another important point about laundering, is how cities, like enclosing people in cities, becomes a very strong way to actually launder people's rage and their labor towards things. And then obviously the more primitive accumulation was colonialism, conquest, slavery, etc. And by how going out and doing that, which Marx also notes, that becomes this, like the point or the quote that you read, that's the seed capital essentially that's used to fund the capitalist apparatus. As far as the state, I was trying to stay out of the typical anarchist versus Marxist Leninist debate, but just because I wasn't trying to make that the focus, I did say withering away at the end because I do believe in some kind of at least transitional situation. But as far as like modernity or minimalism or just ways that we relate, I mean, capitalism is its own, it sets up its own social relations, and I don't think that the relations that we currently have are sustainable. Whether you abolish the state, seize the state, it doesn't, I don't think we would, even if we seize the state, we would have to, like Marx says, the ready-made machinations are not just sitting there for us. We would have to switch those things around to set up a different type of relationship, because I talked about at the end as well, like with the growing climate catastrophe and such, you simply it's just not a sustainable thing. Like you can't just on the capitalist side, let alone the laundering of the rage side, you can't keep like just growing and destroying the planet. And you also can't just keep pissing people off and think that that's sustainable either. So I do think we have to come up with a different form of living, whether people talk about degrowth or etc. I don't think this way is sustainable. All of the consumption that goes on, because it's like, this shit is expensive. Like co-opting people is expensive, and it's a waste of money. I'm talking about, and when we think about like what people actually need, it's a waste of money to put $392 million when George Floyd gets killed, and that gets raised in 1 month. That's a complete waste of money. Like just on a real like material scale, like 115 million in the first 4 days is a waste of money to go to the Democratic Party. 131 million to go to the Republican. This is a waste of money. Remember, wealth is I think I quoted Bordeaux. This is accumulated labor. So it's not money, it's not just generic. This is labor that people are actually doing that produces this money. So it's also not just wasted money, it's wasted labor. It's wasted labor that goes towards, things that actually help us and that actually can change this world, versus it just being, shit that goes towards just cycling the same bullshit.
Just quickly, I've tried to write this down so I didn't forget what I would just want to add to the conversation and to try to offer as a response to Two Black's initial question, and I don't know, maybe have something to say about what Geechee's raised. But working backwards from what you just said, I think from their perspective, they those in power don't see the money as wasted. They see
no.
And I don't think that they see the situation as unmanageable. I think that that's why they keep preparing for ulterior living situations, locations, arrangements, and they increasingly study and become more sophisticated with their propaganda and messaging, because I think that they do intend to use that as a way to reconcile the worsening conditions. But I just wrote down three things. One, and I was just reading about it again from one of my classes. Now I always get the guys, the L's confused. I think this is Lazarsfeld's study on Marienthal, the studying poverty in Europe was basically the point, and the impact of poverty and joblessness on a community. in, I believe, Marienthal, Austria. I did just say I was just rereading it, and some of these particular details I'm forgetting already. But the point of the study was, and this is back in the 30s, was how do we use this the study of society and mass communication, not of course to improve the material conditions, and then of course the Rockefeller Foundation would get involved with this study, not to improve the material conditions, but to see how to adjust the messaging so that when people are abused economically, we can determine, A, are they going to rebel, or are they going to become apathetic, and in which way, in my, of course, biased interpretation of this is, in which ways can we empower, manipulate our messaging to push communities in one direction or another. In other words, this constant surveillance of societies that are being oppressed, not to end the oppression, but to manage the predicted responses to that oppression. So then there was that example that came out that I remember seeing in the Corporation documentary that I'm sure others know more about. But the specific point was how, I think it was the IMF had used a study of the pending water shortage crisis that was going to be imposed because of the privatization of water, I think Bolivia. And they were saying, they were predicting the amount of protests in the streets as a response, and then we're helping coordinate the state's response to the response. And then lastly, as I keep pointing out, just before the COVID pandemic, were the war games being practiced by the U.S. Air Force, who were saying, look, we're studying the situation, and the millennials as a generation are going to be upset and wanting to protest here shortly because none of what has been promised to them is going to happen materially. So again, we're not going to address the material conditions and the joblessness and the this and the that. We're just going to prepare our military to respond to it. So I just say all that to say that I just think that it's kind of what you're talking about, Too Black, in this piece. It's the state's, by your definition of the state, the state's collective preparation for managing and predicting and managing the response of the abused, so that they can ameliorate the pending damage. And I think that they think they can win. I think they think they can outmanage us. And why it's so important that we become more and more organized. So anyway, those are just the quick 2 cents in my attempt to respond to your question.
Yeah, so I guess when I said I don't think, based on what I read, even just on the climate thing, I don't think that they'll win that one. I just don't. So I don't think that. I mean, you can go live on a hill, or you can go to Mars. Like, I don't think that they're gonna win that one. I think these people are at this point legitimately crazy. They can't even find among themselves. They're not even able to build a kind of, like, they can't even come on agreement. The ruling class, white capital, can't even come on agreement. Like, they've always fought. They've always battled. That's not new. I'm not saying white capital is this unified force on every front. They always have differences, but they usually throughout time been able to have enough common ground to, keep themselves from destruction. And I just don't. I think at this point, it's just like there's just too many contradictions. Like, I don't think. I that's just my opinion. I don't think that they could sustain it. That doesn't mean the world would be better. It could just, go into even more utter chaos. I don't know. That's why, like you said, we need to organize. But I don't think they could sustain it. I guess that's what pisses me off.
Did you see the movie Rounders? My bad. Did you see the movie Rounders, though, with Matt Damon and Ed Norton?
Is that the boxer movie?
No, it's the poker playing movie. There's a scene that and this is what I keep thinking of. Not sorry to cut you off, but it was what I was thinking of because I agree. Like, I tend to agree with you. I just think they think that their skill is that they're good enough at all of this that they can. And there's that scene where Ed Norton's character is trying to they're trying to hustle cops in an unsanctioned gambling, poker gambling, whatever, card game. And Ed Norton's character gets caught cheating on the deal. And he says, after they get beaten up and thrown out, he says to Matt Damon, who's looking at him like, man, we lost all this money. Why did you do that? We would have been fine. And Ed Norton's character says, I thought I had gotten good enough at my skill that I could compensate for the fact that we're surrounded by cops who know what's going on and they're watching, and I thought I could get it. And that's kind of how I feel like those that you're talking about, like they are crazy enough that they'll probably be wrong and get us caught and the whole planet's going to just fall apart, whatever. But they think
in many ways,
their mechanics are good enough. That's what I'm thinking of. Anyway,
in many ways, that's already happening. Like, as far as getting us caught up in the destruction. So it's like, coming back to laundering is not, eventually you cannot continue to legitimize the bullshit. Eventually it will catch up with you. Like I said, the source cannot be redeemed. So at some point I think it is becoming increasingly clear, despite all the other contradictions, like we saw even with the whole Queen is Dead thing. I'm not saying that was some revolutionary thing, but the fact that it's fairly like public knowledge, like it's commonly understood that this shit came from slavery. Like this is something that people that I don't expect anything from were at least acknowledging that part. Like people that I don't expect any kind of intellectual who have all the other kinds of contradictions, but at least would be like, yeah, this is a colonizer. Like that shit is at least clear. Like people are less and less prone to buy into the propaganda that this came from some white man's burden or some great history of going out and developing the world. Like that gets consistent pushback today. Like it just doesn't hold up. Even when you have countries, like Jamaica trying to Barbados completely cut off any connection, from the Queen as far as her being the head of state. You have Kenya suing for reparations. Again, I'm not saying these things are perfect by any stretch, but I just think more and more the jig is up on where your money came from. Like we just know that. Now it doesn't fix it completely, because even when you look at a simple cases of laundering, you can know that these people are drug dealers. We've all been in the hood and went to some place that we know was a front. Like that's not anything new. We know this place is a front. We can't really quite follow the money, or we cannot stop the process, even if we do know where the money's coming from, because everybody's been bought off. And I think that's the stage that they're at now, is they know that people know that they're fucking colonizers or whatever you want to call it. Like that shit is pretty clear, but it's like, all right, how can we buy people off to spin it to be something else? Like that. And I don't know if that's necessarily sustainable, because you don't actually have enough money to maintain capital on the level and buy everybody off. So that's like you were talking about, Dr. Ball. That's why we're going to put money in the police and the military, because we don't actually have enough money to bribe everyone. Like we can't bribe everyone to live in our mansions. We just can't do it. And I talked about that in the essay.
Because a full bribe of everybody and we're in communism.
Right. So it's just like they can't do it. So it's like
they can't
give away all. Yeah, they can't give away all the money, so they got to come up with the more repressive apparatus. So you have the soft and hard power battle that you always get here. So they can't bribe everyone. So they understand, damn, we can only bribe like the black petty bourgeoisie. We can only bribe like leaders of certain African, like we can only bribe so many people.
But too black, that's why they let what's his name marry Meghan Markle. The attempt was to preempt what you're talking about, so that people on the one hand will say, yes, the Queen is dead and she was a colonizer, but look how pretty Meghan is. They got a little bit of black up in the family now. Like it is like, or
the contradictions. Yeah, I don't just. That's why I said I'm not saying this is revolutionary. I'm just saying there is a bit of. There was a time where if that person died, this is not like if the Queen died, there wasn't even like we were saying that in our corner of the world, and that was it. And everybody else is like, no, she was good, or it's like, no, they enslaved everyone. On the bribery point, I would say it's not bribing is you still control the means of the production, right? So it's like somebody asked me, I was on another show and they asked me about reparations. And I was like, depending on how that reparations is formatted, it could just be a redistribution of bribes, not necessarily, fixing the ongoing problem, because you're just going to say, we're just going to pay more people off to buy their patriotism or something. Now, I understand reparations can come in many forms, so I'm not saying no to reparations, but that kind of direct payment program, or even some of these investments programs that don't deal with the means of production, don't deal with who controls the actual things that create wealth. If we don't deal with that, then, mass bribery is just a social welfare state, which is what a lot of people claim to be socialism, unfortunately. It's just
that's what Nkrumah, one of those, I got to go find it because we're about to celebrate his life next week. But Nkrumah, that was one of my favorite speeches that he delivered in England, where he said, it's basically your social democracy is wonderful and you're welcome, given it is born off of all the colonialism of us. So you just, like you say, you just redistributing the theft and the bribes and the payoffs, so you live a little bit better. And I haven't seen. Go ahead. Yeah.
With Black Rage, and this is kind of where there's still, like, even when you talk about the Meghan Markle, like, we're joking, but it's true. And I guess to just kind of go through these stages of, like, I define the stage, or I broke down the stages of laundering that is traditionally defined, and then there's these three stages. There's these three stages of that I say is laundering that kind of mirror the way laundering works. But one of the things that the state does, particularly the capitalist state, and Stuart Hall talks about this, and Gramsci talks about this, and Dr. Rasul Mawad talks about this as well in Geographies of Threat, is the point of trying to emphasize consensus. And that's why you get Policing the Crisis as a title for Stuart Hall. But consensus as to say that the ruling class tries to make it seem like their interests are in the interests of everyone. And the state is like the main organizer that does that, right? So you think even if you're angry that you're not getting a fair share, you still might think that the overall way that this is conducted would be fair if they just included you. And that's the way that the state has a way of, like, organizing and pushing a certain hegemony onto people. So I might be angry as a Black man that I can't get this job, or that we won't get this fair shake. I might even be angry about what happens just across the diaspora. But I think if they just shared what within the already existing scheme that they have, we would all be okay. Right. So I still, even though
straight
I know
up, like I said earlier, if the proposal I submitted this week to my superiors, I don't like that word, to my chain of command at Morgan, if they accept and adopt that, you might never hear me say another word about an HBCU ever again. So
I'm even more curious what that is.
I gotta wait. But I, meeting one takes place next month, and I'm just saying, I gotta wait till December ultimately. But I'm just saying, but I get it, but my point is, I get it. Like this would be, I could very much see legitimately, and I say this with all contradictions and self-criticism and accepting all from outside world. I see exactly how this would play out. This is as close as I would be to experiencing the whatchamacallit, the process you're talking about, the bribe or the payoff or the redistribution of the theft.
Dr. James says,
it'd be like y'all are suffering. I did all right. I appreciate it.
But yeah, it's built. That's what I'm saying. It's built in. That's why I don't make I have a few moral condemnations of the Black elite, but overall, I'm making a materialist argument. It's just built. It's baked in. Like I quote Dr. James. She says, when we as you stabilize your family, you're also stabilizing the predatory state. And I think I said stability. Our drive for stability nourishes the laundering machine, right? So it's like, as you try to stabilize, you're going to have to do things that work within the already existing structure. And it's often the case that people believe that that's based on some kind of meritocracy, or that because they've done well, that it legitimizes this thing. So you end up, there's a certain legitimation process that happens just by you entering into the process and trying to like climb the ladder, that you legitimize it through your actions. But there also is like a mental backlog where it's like, oh, well, maybe this does work, or maybe this isn't so bad since I've been able to do it. Or maybe you still know it's flawed, but you'll get the kind of like black liberal perspective of, yes, they don't really like us, but I need to go here so I can open the door to bring more people into my class. Like Fanon talks about, where, you know, people want to like just expand their class of people. They don't want to get rid of the class relationship itself. Right. So it's like that go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, no, finish your point.
That was pretty much it. I mean, I can get into the phases, but that was pretty much it.
So
real quick, Geechee. Sorry, real quick. I just want to answer Big Teal real quick. That yes, I will benefit, but my proposal's way bigger than just me. That's why I'm saying you to shut me up. You can't just appease me. So I will at least hold that much out for my principle. You know, quote, as they say, I shot for the moon on this one. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. If they come through with this, I'm about to, you know. Anyway, go ahead, Geechee. Let me practice what I'm about to do by shut up now.
No, so I think one of the brilliant things about the article, and thinking about when John Henry Clark talked about the most powerful form of mass media was textbooks. And I know he said this before social media, but I think even the root of what the shit that you see on social media came from textbooks. But just thinking in the context of like the dictionary being propaganda, and how we define words, and like you said, even this idea of, you know, financial security or success or whatever the hell that we, you know, think of these definitions. I think it's just extremely powerful to like, because even when you look at the UN and you look at these places that talk about money laundering, it's almost like, hell, the United States will be the poster child for the word. If you put them in the dictionary, they'd be the poster child for the word.
Yeah.
And I think making it plain for people, I think is a powerful tool to kind of counter the onslaught of like extreme heavy violence, of psychic violence that you get every day from this bullshit as propaganda. So I mean, I think that was a powerful connection.
Yeah, because it's like, again, when I initially when I was going to write this, I did not think about it the way I'm thinking about it now. I really was just going for the Black elite, because I feel like that struggle is important, because I think that they stand in front of, like we were saying, we can see the Queen is dead and be happy, but then celebrate Meghan Markle. That's a major contradiction. So I feel like they need to be struggled against, because they create those contradictions. But we can get there. But as far as the definitions, yeah, like they have a way of just normalizing things and we don't even question it, and then you get called some crazy person for doing it. But I'm like, legitimately, based on your own definition, that's why I didn't cite any radicals on the laundering thing. I cite people, you know, that are in the finance. I cite the UN. I cite I can't remember the name.
Breaking Bad.
The U.S. Treasury. Yeah, like all of this is all what y'all do. So it's like I didn't cite nobody that has some radical redefining. No, like this is what y'all say. You say crimes done on one side into a legitimate system, but we know that even they know that they've done quote unquote crimes, or at least, you know, some type of theft or whatever. So the definition simply just doesn't hold up. I'll argue that with anybody. It just doesn't hold up. Like you can't say that this is legitimate based on anything other than conquest. You cannot say that this is like, once you conquer people, then you get them to concede because they have no other choice. Then you get them to be like, yeah, this is okay, or we're gonna fight, we're gonna vote, or whatever. Then you set up all the propaganda. That's the front. But initially, you just stole, robbed, enslaved. That's what you did. So you could put a front in front of it all you want, but like that's what you did. So like we're not, you know, here we go. We're not we're not moving off that. Hey, this is a long essay, y'all. I had to use a lot of words.
I loved it though. I loved it. I was like, I couldn't help but crack up, man. I was like, I said, look at my man get bougie with the language. I said, there it go. It's like, yeah, that's what's up. Nah, my bad, man. Yeah, keep going.
But no, I'm just saying, like, if we could we go through the phases that I had just to get people a little more concrete, and we can hopefully get into reverse laundering. That kind of speaks to what Dr. Ball's thought. Maybe when he doesn't want to tell us what the bribe is. But there's three phases. I talk about incubation, labor, and commodification. Again, mirroring, placement, layering, and integration. So to launder Black Rage, these are the three phases: incubation, labor, and commodification. And incubation is a stage where there's constant contradictions that go on. So incubation is on one side, just I think the most important stage, really, where the rage is just being laid, like the conditions are being laid for people to actually be angry, right? So this is when, depending on whatever historical moment we're in, this is more so than just day-to-day stuff. This is when people are going to school. This is when people are just living, and they're experiencing all these forms of degradation. I'm talking about Black folks that inspire the rage that will eventually just show up through labor. But at the same time, you're receiving all this indoctrination, like we talked about. At the same time, you're receiving the bribes of just a wage or whatever keeps you stable in life. At the same time, you're trying to pursue some kind of stability, and that is occupying a lot of your time and thought. You're not thinking about revolution or anything like that. And the fronts are constantly being built out to discipline you in a way that as it advances, even when you get angry, like I said, it'll move you towards this. We just want a Black person here. We just want this bribe or whatever. And you can get bought off because incubation sets up all those contradictions. But but coming back to the original type of laundering, that's the rage being placed into the system. That's the placement stage of it, basically. You get to the labor stage, that's the stage we often popularize and see. That's when uprisings pop off. That's when protests pops off. That's when police stations burn. That's when shit goes down, because that rage has been incubated prior, and then it shows up as a form of labor. Because again, it's actually producing a social capital. It's producing a pressure. It brings all this money out. It brings out the tanks. It brings out capital just by producing that labor. Like it shows up. So then that's when the bribery gets real distinct, because again, you have different types of rage. You have the Black elite, who are more likely to, since they already have a certain level of stability, they're more likely to use the labor produced by that rage to sell their rage off, because they can stand in as the representatives of the masses. They'll sell their rage off to get some kind of benefits from it, or they'll just repress it because they know by repressing it, they can get benefits as well, depending on the situation. The masses are not, again, I'm not saying anyone is inherently revolutionary, but the masses of people, the proletariats, the lumpins, whatever you want to call it, they are more likely, I think I said, are more likely to take over, are more likely to snap like prisoners who are at their wits' end, and the Black elite are more likely to cop a plea like jailhouse snitches. Like that's the difference. So the masses rise up and may not be clear on everything, but do want something better than the situation that they're in, and are not simply trying to sell everything off. But this is where it's layered, because they think a lot of times we're taught, or we simply just don't have the power to do anything about it, that the Black elite represent our interests. And we're coming out of a time when, particularly under just straight up colonialism, Jim Crow, where that might have made more sense. But they'll use that labor to they as in capital use that labor, and they'll layer it together as if it's all the same type of rage. And this is where bell hooks, regardless of what people feel, is important, because she makes very distinct differences. She talks about narcissistic rage of a Black elite who simply just wants to be integrated into the existing legitimate system, or not a legitimate system, but the existing system. And she talks about a militant rage, that can be galvanized to do more militant revolutionary things. This is what she says. You can read the essay. So it's like, but so she says the point of that, she says white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. The point is it's to position the narcissistic rage and make it appear like it's the militant rage, like to just flatten it. And once you flatten it, if you think of, like, again, coming back to the labor point, like the Black elite are like scabs. They're a labor aristocracy. This is a shout out to CBS who gave me that framework. And they stand in and they sell labor out. They don't want us to keep striking. They sell us out. Once that occurs, then we just become another commodity, because, again, using Marx, labor is valorized into a commodity. And then we just, because it's just labor power. It's just the labor that we sell back. Basically, commodification is simply just going back to work. You return to the commodity that you were already conquered to be. So when people talk about commodification, it's not something that they commodify blackness or Walmart. Like, by the time Walmart's selling the Juneteenth thing, the commodification already went down by the fact that Walmart exists. So Walmart can do whatever it wants until they might do something that's just too gross that you can't handle it anymore. And then commodification, like I talk about in the essay, that's when neocolonialism comes in. That becomes, I think, today, the highest stages of a front is neocolonialism. Like, it's the highest stages of a front because it's just easy to absorb everything else. And then once our rage becomes a commodity, then you get the TV shows that promote some bullshit diversity. You get mermaids or whatever the hell. Then you get those things, because now rage is not something that's a form of labor. Now it's something that's simply consumed as a commodity. Like, that's the process.
So basically, back to saying that him and Jared is gonna come and watch The Woman King and talk bell hooks, and I'm gonna facilitate it. I'm gonna be a part. But that's what it looks like it's coming up: the bell hooks, The Woman King discussion.
Well, the way I see, from what I've seen in the chat, I mean, I want to go back to my Vernon philosophy and just remind everybody that when you like something in this context that Two Black is even outlining, if you like a media product in this context, you have to become even more critical of it. So if it is as good as people in the chat have been saying, and as Dr. Wimbush and Paul Coates have reported, then we have to be more critical of that than we would be of even a Tyler Perry film. And so I hope, but let's, I look forward to seeing it. I look forward to seeing it.
This is the thing about fronts, just real quick about fronts, that people might misunderstand. Fronts are not actually, like, fronts do serve an actual function. Like, they do. So, like, if you are a strip club, you do have strippers there, and they do serve a function of pleasure or whatever people are there for. If you own a grocery store, you do sell groceries. Even if it comes from drug money, it does still provide those things. So it's not, so a bad front is a front that doesn't do the thing it advertises as, and those usually fall apart. That would be Black Lives Matter, right? Like, it's just a bad front. It doesn't actually, like, as an institution, it doesn't actually function even to do the modicum of just a little bit of the things that they say they do. But good fronts, reason they get you is because they actually do serve something, that they do give you something. Like, when you go into it, you can buy whatever's there. So you're like, damn, they sell drugs, and this isn't, like, it's like, it almost hurts, So it's like a good movie or whatever, like, commodity of rage, basically. That's the temptation. It's a good front. It's like, damn, this actually gave me something I could feel proud about as a Black person or an African. It's actually fed me something, right? It's not simply like just complete bullshit versus if it's some white person playing an Egyptian. Like, we're not watching that. But if you actually give us something that moves us, like, it does facilitate some actual thing that people are desiring. It does serve, I'd say that, like, in a sentence in the essay, it does serve a human need. So I get why that's complicated for people, but that's why it works. If it was something that was always bullshit, we always knew it was bullshit, and it didn't move any of us, then it wouldn't work. The only reason it works is because it does actually give you something that does fulfill some need, but it just channels you somewhere else. So like I said, now your rage has been consuming versus acting. Now it's in what I can watch and be inspired by and feel good about. And then maybe I can grow up and do the same thing or whatever. It's very much based in the consumptive commodification stage versus it being, well, we were burning shit down. Now I can watch people burn shit down. We were quote unquote kings and queens. Now I can go watch that and feel good about it. I don't have to actually try to get back the things that gave me the position to even be a king or a queen or transition that to something better. I can just feel good to know that I do come from that. Like it pushes you in the state puts you in a stage of not doing shit. You know, like
I'm waiting for. So EA Sports just announced that this is the last year that they're producing, that they have an exclusive relationship with FIFA. So this is the last year that they're producing the FIFA EA Sports, FIFA game. Some say this is good. Some say this is bad. I'm going to say this is a good opportunity because I want to see EA Sports develop if it hasn't already, the Black Lives Matter, video game experience where you can watch someone get killed by the police. You can organize your local community, get your points up and organize who can create the biggest protest, who can get the biggest bag from the co-opters, like who can get the biggest foundation grant. That would be like the game, building your Black Lives Matter Foundation, EA Sports, building like career mode in sports, building your front. That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. That's what. So now that they're not making the soccer game anymore, I think they can, move on from Madden and all of that and go into build your front. Just quickly, and Ricky, I don't know if you can, if maybe say something more in the chat or even jump on here and explain what you mean, or if either you, Geechee, or Two Black understand where she's coming from with this, but what could be applied to culture? What is it that you mean? The corrupting, the co-optation, the front building? Is that what you mean by that question? And if either of you have any thoughts on that, let me know. Yeah, I can't wait to see this now. Wait a minute. She was mourning Queen Elizabeth. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, go ahead, Two Black. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, I would like to know. I mean, Erica can just hit me up. We can talk about it directly, but I would like to know just specifically what she means by culture. But I know consumption and consumerism. Okay, that helps. Yeah, I mean, I think I've been going over Cabral the last few days in just different ways because we got it on Black Myths. We're doing the myth that Marxism is Eurocentric. So I've been trying to go over different so I've been trying to go over different applications of Marxism just to better understand how people applied it. And Cabral talks a lot about culture, but not in the way that culture gets talked about over here as simply just this kind of celebratory, even amongst the kind of Afrocentric spaces. A lot of times it's just that kind of a celebration of Blackness and kind of an abstract. And I think that actually is one of the contradictions that leads to this worshiping of representations because they didn't work that shit out. That's another conversation. But I think with culture, it's, and again, she says culture in air quotes, there's a certain individualism that comes from this culture, right? So everything is about how I can kind of I can make myself best, particularly now in 2022. It's about how I can reach the top, and the world is just kind of this fountain for me. And when you approach things that way, laundering is not only it's not even this corrupt thing. It actually, I think, in many ways corresponds with the way that we relate to each other. It makes sense. Everything is transactional. It is a bribe. I do just know you to get to the next point. So I will give you this, you can give me that. It's just the way that we relate to each other. It doesn't require anything special. That's just the way that people treat each other. We're not interested in building genuine relationships and caring about each other as much as we just want to be able to move to the next spot. And I don't think that that's an individual thing on the larger front. I think that that's something that is cultivated, or as I say, incubated under the state. I don't think that's how people are naturally built, but I think more and more that's how it's built. So when you look at the Black Rage or any of these kind of more popular Black things, like we're taught to consume it that way. Like this, even the whole Black empowerment thing is how I can, build myself up, and I can build a brand off of it. Like it's
I gotta bring it back up. I can't let it go. That's what Zahir Ali told me outside of Al Jazeera Studios in downtown Washington, D.C. when we had that and Dr. Burroughs standing right there, but says he didn't hear it. So I have no corroboration. But Zahir Ali said he did not want to be disassociated from a book that he admitted having nothing to do with, but that his association with Manning Marable's book helped him build his own brand. I mean, it was the most surreal shit I had ever heard to that point. But to your point, it's very real. Anyway, go ahead.
Wait, real quick. So speaking to that point of him building his brand and Ricky's point, culture and the idea of hustle. To Black, how are you? What are you saying hustle is compared to this Black Rage? Like the hustle that Black people have in a cultural context of like, we have to be hustlers, we have to hustle, Ace Hood hustle, all this hustle. Is that like how did that relate to this Black Rage? I guess it's reactionary, but like, is it like?
Yeah, I don't. It's again. That's why I say rage isn't inherently revolutionary, because depending on how we got conceive of it or where it gets directed, you might actually be angry, and you could say this is reactionary, and I wouldn't disagree. But you can be angry at the situation, like even what Jay-Z said a few weeks ago. I don't think he was completely lying. I think there's a part of him that believes what he was saying. I obviously don't agree, but in the sense of, I've been denied opportunities, so I'm gonna go get this money. And that can be an expression, the labor of Black Rage as well, because there is a certain chip on your shoulder that you hold throughout that process. Like, they're not recognizing me, I'm gonna make them recognize me. Like, I think that's a very dampened sense of
you don't have to go any farther than your boy right here, to Black. I'm admitting that what I'm gonna end up announcing in December is part of that. Like whether I'm successful or not, I'll share it in a couple of months, and that's exactly part of it. So it is a reactionary rage that I'm experiencing. Like, I can acknowledge that. Like, I'm saying, me attempting to, now I'm doing something that ultimately would be more than just me individually, but ultimately it's like, it is very much a part of that. Like, my anger is saying, in this situation, I'm just going, this immediate money grab is going to be is satisfying my rage at the situation, but I can step back, especially in the light of this conversation, and say I'm not claiming it's some revolution, and I'm not claiming that it's going to help anybody else, or that many. Anyway, we'll see. But there are limits on what it would do. But I get it. So I get it. That's all.
But I think by bringing that up, I think you make a good connection, because I think that's how it often does get assumed as this is revolutionary. That's what I mean by layering the interests. It gets promoted. Anything that we do to succeed gets promoted as a satisfaction of the rage that cannot be resolved unless you eliminate the thing that conquered you. Otherwise, it's never going to be complete satisfaction. But anything that we do gets promoted as being the revolutionary thing simply because we succeeded at it. And that's how those interests, I think that's a good way of saying it, how those interests get layered. It's not an abstract thing. It's that we see like, oh, Jay-Z made it in this white capitalist world, so that's success for me. And it might seem, when you stand back, that seems like kind of weird how that feels that way, but it's because you have that same chip on your shoulder. That's probably why you relate to it. Because you think it does. That's why I say it again about the fronts. It does serve some thing that we have in us. It's not something that we're completely alienated from.
And that's and Quaker Anarchist, that's funny. That's what it's going to be. Me, Dr. West, and Viola Davis are going to be doing a master class I'm mad you sussed out the surprise announcement. But that that damn, I just lost my thought. What was I just gonna say? What were you just saying? Damn, my bad. I just completely lost my thought.
No, I was just saying, I think I see a comment. Coco said it good here. Reactionary rage is rebelling, well, without a cause of without a cause, how I see it sometimes. I think that's a good way of saying it. Like that there's a rage that it's an inevitable fact of conquest and everything that follows it, that you're going to be angry because there's so many slights that you're going to experience throughout your lifetime living in this, under this shit. It's an inevitable. It doesn't matter who you are, what your politics are, you're going to feel it on some level, and it's going to show up in actual labor at some point. That's an inevitable thing. So then it becomes a question of how does it show up, and how do we organize so where it doesn't just simply just funnel the same thing that it's fighting? You know, like how do we organize that? That becomes the question, because it's inevitable. That's why it works. Again, that's why it works. Again, I keep saying it, front serve a legitimate thing. And that's why when someone said to me co-optation is a self-critique, I think that's real, because it's not fit. It's really not accurate to say the state just did this and we were just innocent bystanders. That's not how it goes down. The state builds consensus and we concede to it, whether it's through our material conditions and we don't feel like we can do anything better, or we actually believe it. Like one of the two, it doesn't really matter whether it's ideology or just coercion of your actual material situation, or both. That's what it does. Like that's why I say like we need to reverse launder. And I don't want this to become the bullshit that decolonizing and all of this has become, where you just put Black people on your syllabus and you're decolonizing. I'm not, you know, we're not doing that shit. But reverse laundering is, again, coming back to just the general definitions of these things, is when you take something from the quote unquote legitimate system and you fund something illegal. Like that's what so the United States did this. They sold guns to Iran and they used that money to fund a war in Nicaragua. I note that in the essay. That's called reverse laundering. And they did this at the same time that they were outlawing money laundering in the United States, literally in the same time as that. There's that. So it's like, but you want to take, if you're getting, because again, we're all gonna, if any of us who are not solely just in poverty and struggling, are all gonna get some version of a bribe, some of it not much, you know. So you're gonna get something because it's just the nature of the state. So then it becomes a question of how do you use that to fund the things that are actually outlawed under the state, and that's not something to be discussed above ground. But that's why I say in the essay that lies in a different conversation. But even the things that aren't, go ahead.
It's no, I'm just gonna say, because unfortunately I do have to run right at 10 o'clock, but it's a perfect way to sort of wrap up on your point in something that the late great Dr. James Turner said to us once upon a time back in the day. The question is not, can you earn 100,000 a year? The question is, can you earn 100 and live off of 30? And that was the point he was getting at, to your exact question about what happens above and underground. So listen, in the last couple of minutes we have, let me let either of you, you know, put us up on anything, say any last comments. And I greatly appreciate you both coming on, and Two Black, appreciate you writing this article and pulling our coats on it a little bit. And of course, shout out to everybody in the chat having a vigorous conversation. The point I forgot, by the way, was just simply to say that so much of what propaganda and psychological warfare attempts to do is create surveillance for the purpose of feeding people acceptable versions of what they clamor for. So when you're saying there's this rage, it's okay, we get you're upset. Okay, so we'll put you know, a couple sad, we'll put, you know, Mark Lamont, no, not we'll put Van Jones or Roland Martin crying on TV, and that will be the acceptable expression of your rage. When Van Jones cries on CNN, that's acceptable Black rage, and we all should feel better as a result. Anyway, any concluding thoughts from either of you today? And thanks again to you both.
No, I mean, I think I appreciate, you know, coming on here to be the latest out. I feel like, you know, to be honest, I don't think I would have ever gotten to this point of analysis without the myth of Black buying power. So that's why I wanted to make sure I stopped by here.
Oh, and, I appreciate,
you know, I didn't just run everywhere else, because I don't think that was one of the, I've told you the story, Dr. Ball, how initially I was pissed off when you wrote that, because I was in like, so because I was much younger and I didn't, and I thought that was the way. So, so I appreciate that. I think that helped. But I would just say, yeah, everybody go read it if you get a chance. It's a 2-parter. I'll be on other shows talking about it, trying to lay it out. And eventually I'll have more visuals to explain some of these things. But yeah, I just appreciate everybody hearing me out. And I think it's something to consider, particularly if you're organizing, to understand how these things get funneled and how they get layered. I think it's important understanding that so you don't get confused, because laundering is constantly in motion. And I think we need to think of it that way.
Yeah, where is Big Pun? No, right on, man. I appreciate you breaking it down that way. I think your writing is on point, and this was a great piece. It's linked in the show description, so people should definitely check it out, as they should everything else. Geechee, what you got?
Definitely, man. Appreciate the conversation too, Black. And that article is powerful. And maybe Jay-Z is putting on the front and he's funding some underground shit. Hopefully. But thank you though. Appreciate it.
Right on. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Stay tuned. Make sure you got all the bells and everything selected so you don't miss anything coming up on the channel. Shout out to all my comrades here and elsewhere. Peace, because we know you're willing to fight for it. Like Fred Hampton used to say, catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like It throughout the BPM platform. Peace, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Let me show these suckers how to ball out here. Oh, man, let me get this together here. Oh, layup. Oh, no. Shot. Oh, three. Oh, it's like Brick City out here. Mid-range. Oh, my goodness. I can't buy a bucket out here. I missed the whole damn basket. Oh, my goodness. What's going on, man? My game is looking trash. Oh, here we go. Black Power Media shirt. Now we cooking. Tree. I'm taking on 3 of y'all with these right here. Between the legs. Oh, my goodness. Behind the back. Layup. Oh, did he just do a reverse? He is in beast mode out here. I ain't got to look. It's falling. Oh, my goodness. This guy is going 3, 2, 1. Kobe. Nice. Black Power Media, baby. Nice. Empower yourself. Go get you some of that Black Power Media gear right here, blackpowermedia.org. Yeah.